Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Somehow I Live podcast, sponsored by Bird Dogs, pants, shorts with built-in underwear. So today is a very special day for the podcast. I have my first ever guest. It is a nice gentleman that I do attend church with. So right now I'd like to introduce my good friend Steve. Steve will be joining us from a parallel universe.
Hi, Alec. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Steve, how are you doing?
Excellent. Doing very well. Don't look over here.
Yeah. Steve is across the country on a secret mission, so we'll get more into that later. But him and my parents, they do a Bible study, and Steve does some voice acting. And my dad and him were talking about my podcast, and Steve was intrigued, so got him to join us today. So I'm very happy to have you, Steve.
Thank you, Alec. Don't look over here. I'm in a different place.
You're just so good looking, I can't help it.
Please. No, I had seen your other podcasts, and I know that you had said in, I don't know if it was all of them, but most of them, you had said that you were looking forward to having a guest.
Yeah.
And I kept expecting that the next podcast you'd have a guest, and you didn't. So I thought, well, I'll see if Alec wants to do this. And if we can get the technology to work out, then we'll have something.
Yeah. No, so I think I have everything running properly. I see the mic levels are looking good. I'm using the Streamlabs, what I usually use when I live stream and record most of the stuff. Usually I record on Zoom, but because of this being a little bit of a longer episode I'm hoping for, because Steve's an interesting guy, I wanted to be able to make sure I got everything that we're going to go over today. And ironically, I was just going over a funny story with Steve that I wanted to share with Steve. It's about my college diploma that we were looking at a couple of minutes ago here. And Steve was like, "What do you mean?" So for most of you that know, that are tuning in, I attended Medaille College. It is was a small private college in Buffalo, New York. It had about 2,000 students that attended yearly, a private college. It was super nice. Went there for 4 years, absolutely enjoyed it. The year after I graduated, however, in August of 2023, it closed its doors officially. The story behind that we can trace back to March of 2020, the year of the pandemic. The president of our college, I guess I can say his name, he doesn't even live in the country anymore. Dr. Ken Maker, like many people in power, gave himself executive powers to have final say without having to go to the board about anything. Just wanted to be able to approve anything that needed to be approved, any guidelines that were going on in the pandemic. So fast forward a few years from 2020 to 2023, Dr. Ken Maker decided it was a great idea to take all of the money out of the bank account because he did not need the board's approval. So he made off with $60 million and a Mexican girlfriend, and we're living in Germany. So safe to say he's got a really good life.
Wow.
$60 million in the bank and a young Mexican girlfriend. I don't know if they're still together. Met her on the internet. But yeah, so with all the money pulled from our college bank account, there wasn't enough new money to come in to pay all the bills, and just like that, a year after I graduated, my college no longer exists. So
that's crazy.
I guess I'm not a college graduate anymore.
No, you still are.
I have the diploma to prove it, but the college no longer exists. So that was the funny story that I had for you there about.
That is a different story. I can't say I've ever heard of that. I've heard of people who were in charge of an organization taking all the money. I mean, even like pastors of churches, where the church builds up a big war chest, as it were, and then they just take off with the church secretary and take all the money.
Very church-like.
or the church secretary takes it and goes and leaves the pastor and the congregation in the lurch. But there's no reason that wouldn't happen for a college or university.
Yeah, a lot of money.
Either, yeah.
Tempts people. It's crazy. But moving on from hopefully the first of many funny stories tonight, I've come to be aware that Steve was a bachelor up until quite a few years ago.
Just a few years
just a
ago.
few years ago, and come to find out, he has lived several places.
Don't look over here.
Yep, has come to live several places in his lifetime. He was telling me that he had just moved to Knoxville back in 2019. So, Steve, if you kind of want to go through, I guess, if you want to start now and kind of work your way back, or give us a couple of places that you lived that were pretty cool. I've only lived in 2 places, Buffalo and Tennessee. Most of the people know that. They don't care. They care about you. So
No, they care about you. That's why they're watching. But I was born in Georgia, small town in Georgia.
Okay.
Raised there. My parents never moved away anywhere else once they were there. I've got 3 brothers. Two of them did move away for time. One of them for a little time, another one for more time. But I was essentially the prodigal because I moved all over the place. Most of my adult years were spent in the Atlanta area, which was about an hour and a half, 2 hours from home. So close enough to come visit on the weekends, but not close enough that I felt like Mom and Dad could invade my personal space, where I was living and whatnot. At any rate, I've lived a few other places. I did go to school for a while, graduate school in Virginia, at what is now known as Regent University. Back in the day, it was CBN University when I attended there, studying my graduate degree I was studying for was film. But I've also lived in Florida a couple of times. Lived in near the Seattle area, so that was an interesting experience.
I bet.
And it's fascinating to me how differently people communicate depending on what part of the country they're from.
Yeah.
For instance, is when I lived in Seattle. One day, I was only there for like a year and a half, but I'm at this new company. I'm in a business meeting with other people, and I look out the window, and as most people are aware, it rains in Seattle
daily.
All the time, like 90% of the time through the year, 85-90% of the time. But in the summers, specifically July and August, it doesn't rain. So, but we're having in a meeting, and I looked outside and I noticed that it was raining, but the sun was shining.
Sun shower.
Well, that's apparently what people call it other places.
Yeah.
We call it something else in the South. Have you heard of that expression?
What do you call it?
I looked out the window and I said, well, looks like the devil's beating his wife. And the whole room looked at me like I was some kind of a terrorist or something.
Well, especially in Seattle, too.
Yeah, it's like, who is this guy? What's he talking about? What's he seeing outside? And I said, I guess you guys haven't heard that expression here? They said, no. I said, well, where I grew up, it meant that it was raining while the sun was out.
The devil was beating his wife.
The devil's beating his wife. And so I thought, well, maybe this was just like a family thing. And maybe I wasn't aware that it was a regional thing. So that night I went on Facebook and I posted on Facebook. I said, look, today at work I was in a meeting, but I could see outside that the sun was shining and it was also raining. And I said something that threw everybody off in the meeting. I said, for my friends in the South, and most of my friends were from the South, what do we call it when it's raining while the sun's shining? And 90% of the responses were, devil's beating his wife.
First I've ever heard of it.
But again, that's a Southern expression.
Right.
And I'm guessing that you got similar kinds of, you might not even know what they are. Things that you've said through your life growing up in Buffalo that people don't say other places.
Yeah, like Don's, for example. Sorry.
Don't look at me.
Yeah, don't look at you. Don's, for example. If I say Don's to you, like I'm going to Don's, what would you think I was saying?
I think you were going to somebody's restaurant or a pool
Yeah.
hall or something.
McDonald's.
Oh, okay, Don's.
We
Okay.
just called it Don's. Like, for instance, when it's raining while it's sunny out, we called that a sun shower. That's just what the weatherman said, so that's what I said.
And that's what most people say.
Yeah, sun shower. But
I don't know that I've ever heard it called
Right.
"Devil's beating his wife" when I was watching a news show.
right, especially not on the
Probably not.
news. That's probably
Probably not.
that's a no. No, we used to, growing up, when it was raining, we used to say with the thunder that the Angels were bowling. That's what we used to say.
Okay.
There goes the Angels. They're having fun again. They're bowling, because it would sound like a bowling alley was going off.
I hadn't heard that, but it makes all kinds of sense.
Yeah. the
More
heavens
sense
open
than
up.
the expression that I mentioned.
I do like your expression.
To be honest with you, and this is the case, that Alec and I had to come to terms, come to an understanding, an agreement of what we were talking about when he first mentioned, hey, maybe you'd like to come and be a guest on my podcast. And this was a week ago on Tuesday. Well, I don't know if people know. We're recording this on Thursday.
June 20th.
But so last week, he said, yeah, why don't you come over next Thursday? And I said, well, is that the day after tomorrow? Or is it a week later?
Yeah.
And he said, no, it's a week later. Why would you think it was day after tomorrow? And that's because
that is the next Thursday.
that
is-
would have been the next Thursday. It was 2 days later. I actually missed getting together with a friend one time because that's how his vocabulary was. He said, okay, we'll get together, come over to my house, bring some chips and dip, and we'll go see a movie, and then we'll get something to eat. We'll come back here and watch TV till late or something. And so for some reason, the next week, and he said it'll be next Saturday. And so this was like on a Wednesday. And so the next Monday, I said, looking forward to coming to your house on Saturday. And he said, why? I'm going to be out of town. You were supposed to be here 2 days ago. I said, no. You said next Saturday. He said, right. And that was the next Saturday. I said, no. Last Wednesday, that would have been this Saturday. He said, there is no this Saturday. There's next Saturday, as in the next Saturday. I said, no. But it was in this week.
Right.
So this Saturday, it was on a Wednesday. This Thursday, this Friday, this Saturday would have been this week. On Monday would have been next Monday.
Yeah.
And the Saturday after that would have been next Saturday. He said, no. The next Saturday was next Saturday. I said, well, then what's the Saturday after that? He said, that'd be Saturday week. And that's what he called it. Now, we live in the same country.
Right.
We use the same language.
For the most part.
But I didn't even realize it when I was growing up. My parents had words that they made up that I didn't know weren't words.
Yeah.
They would say, what was it? Oh, and if we ever wanted to know what a word was, we'd hear it at school or, see it on a billboard or hear it in a TV commercial or something like that, we'd say, ask Mom or Dad,
Yeah.
what does that word mean? And they'd say, look it up in the dictionary.
I got that.
Because we had a 2-volume, the camera's this way, 2-volume dictionary, and we didn't know how to spell it, but we had to figure out how to spell it so we could look it up and see what it meant. And so one day, I must have been in middle school, and my dad, Mom and Dad, had a word that they invented that meant a late night snack while we're watching TV. because Dad would ask for it. We'd
Right.
eat dinner. We'd go, watch the TV, whatever was on that we watched all the time, and he would say, like at a commercial break, because we had to watch the commercials back then.
Of course, I remember that was their bathroom break.
That was you couldn't skip past them.
Nope, you had like 30 to 40 seconds to run.
No. It was 2 minutes.
Oh, 2 minutes?
2 minutes. Sometimes it would be a single 1 minute commercial and then 2 30-second commercials.
Right.
But it was the breaks between were 2 minutes, and so Dad would look over at Mom and say, "Honey, why don't you get me a Cersei?" And she'd say, "All right, you want something sweet or salty?" And he'd either say sweet or salty, or surprise me, or what have you got, and pick something. So we just assumed that was
food,
an English word,
Cersei. That was
for a snack at night.
Yeah.
And so I'm having a conversation with some of my buddies in middle school, and I mentioned about having a Cersei, and they looked at me and said, "What? What are you talking about?" I said, "A Cersei, that's a late night snack. That's not a word." "Yeah, it is." So when I came home from school, I walked in the house. "Mom." No, I didn't even say Mom. I went straight to the dictionary, pulled it up, had to figure out how to spell it. Cersei, that's got to be S-E-R-S.
I was thinking it'd start with a C, to be honest. I would have went right to the C's.
When I didn't find it in the S's, I looked in the C's. I looked every potential way I could think of to spell it. Couldn't find it. So Mom's in the kitchen doing something. I went in and said, "Mom, how do you spell Cersei?" She said, "Well, you don't spell it." "What do you mean you don't spell it? I got to know how it's spelled, and I can't find it in the dictionary." She said, "Son, it's not a word. It's something that your dad and I made up, and we understand each other when we're talking." I said, I felt betrayed as a middle schooler that my parents were teaching me junk that made me look stupid to my friends.
I had a similar situation like that with my mom, but it wasn't a word. I'm not sure if you're aware of who Lizzie Borden is.
Absolutely.
So when I was real young, my mom had told me that when I was misbehaving, that my crazy Aunt Lizzie was going to come over, and I said, "Who is crazy Aunt Lizzie?" She said, "Well, your great aunt, Lizzie Borden, who lived in England or wherever the heck she lived, and she killed her parents with an axe, and she would sing the song, Lizzie Borden with an axe
gave her parents 40 whacks.
Yeah,
gave her father 40
whacks.
whacks. And then when she was done, she gave her mother 41.
Some rendition of that song.
Yep.
So as a kid, I was like, yeah, I'm related to Lizzie Borden. That's like my distant, my great aunt. I was like, and this was right around when computers were coming out, and I was in elementary school. So I was sitting there the one day in 3rd grade on Google at the school computer, Googling Lizzie Borden, and my teacher came by, and she's like, why are you Googling Lizzie Borden? And I was like, oh, that's my great aunt. My mom told me. Like, so we used to have agendas, and the teachers would write in the agenda what you did that day, and if you got in trouble, your parents would have to sign your agenda for the next day to make sure your parents saw it.
Yeah.
So 3rd grade, I don't know how to read words longer than one syllable, so my teacher writes this profound note in my agenda. I'm like, Mom, you have to sign this. Sorry. I'm like, Mom, you have to sign this. And she's like, what do I have to sign? I was like, well, I got in trouble for Googling my great aunt, Lizzie Borden. She was like, what? So that started a long list of email chains between my 3rd grade teacher and my mom over the legitimacy of me being related to this murderer.
Here's the thing. I got to tell you, it's not just in families.
Yep.
It's not just regional. It is anywhere that a language is spoken.
Yeah.
You said you've only been in Buffalo and
Knoxville. Only 2 places I've ever lived.
You've never been out of the country.
I went on a cruise once, and I've been to Canada, so technically yes.
I don't know if any of this stuff is true in Canada or not, but I'll never forget the first time I ever went over to England. I've been a few times, but the first time was when I was in graduate school. I was a member of the drama troupe that the school sponsored. And so at our spring break, which was 2 weeks long, we went over to England and performed. Now, it was known that, at CBN University at the time, was a Christian graduate school. Mm-hmm. So we had 2 weeks of performances set up at mostly churches and schools. Most of the schools were like elementary schools. But we had this sketch that we did that was a funny sketch. It was on the parable of the prodigal son.
Okay.
And the narrator, somebody narrated and would tell the story, and then 3 of us would act out the story as though we were the characters. And so I played the father, and then there was the 2 sons, and I don't remember which of my troupe members was which son, but I know it started with me.
Right.
Because the narrator would say, "There was a man," and we all had our backs to the audience. So, "There was a man," and I'd turn around. What happened?
Screen just went black. Should be up. There we are. All right, we're still good.
We're back. We're still recording.
Yep, we're good.
So I don't know if it caught any of that or not.
No, it did. It's still recording.
So it did catch me picking my nose in between.
Yeah, it did.
All right. So the narrator says, "There was a man," and I turn around and face the audience, who had 2 sons, and I do like this. Mm-hmm.
And that's a no-no.
And we had done it, I don't know how many times here in the States.
Can't do this.
But let me finish. So
don't look at me.
So we go over to England, and the first place we perform was at a church, a big church, and we do that sketch. There was a man who had 2 sons, and the whole congregation went a little bit of giggling, but not much. And I thought, what was that about? I didn't do anything funny yet, because there was funny stuff that happened.
Right.
And we did that everywhere, and nobody ever told us anything until the very last place we performed, which was an elementary school. We had like 150 to 200 kids sitting on the floor in the cafeteria watching us do this stuff. And we do that sketch, and sure enough, there was a man who had 2 sons. Well, that was like the first thing we did, and we had like a half-hour, 45-minute program. And so we did a lot of other stuff. And one of the kids comes up to me afterwards and says, "Why did you make a dirty sign at us?" I said, what do you mean? What dirty sign? Well, he wasn't going to show me. So we asked one of the teachers there, and she said, yeah. In England, this means the same as 1 less finger in America. So I had flipped off every audience that we performed for while we were in England.
Yep.
I didn't know. And I've heard it said that United States and England are 2 countries separated by the same language.
Yep.
And it's not just that, it's a lot of other stuff. Mannerisms, some of the words. Yep. I went to, the second time I went over there, it was just me. I got scheduled again for a couple of weeks to perform at a number of different places. And when I got picked up at the airport in London, the guy that picked me up, I had a performance that night, and it was at a church. So we had a 4-hour drive to get to that place. And I asked him as we're leaving the airport, I said, "Listen, could you go ahead and tell me what are all of your dirty words?" And he was a little bit shocked. He didn't know. So I told him what happened the time before. He said, "Oh, yeah. Okay, you're right. You should know what that stuff is, so I'll tell you." And he went through and talked. He said, first of all, we have all the same dirty words that you've got in America.
Yeah.
Because we watch so much American television, American movies, that kind of thing. He said, but we've got some more. He said, don't ever use the word bloody.
Yep. Nope.
You see it a lot, you hear it a lot in British media, but it's more offensive
Right.
than that. It's something that you might use when you're with very close friends or with family, but you don't use it in public.
No.
Okay, I got that. And so he went through and talked about some of the other things. We get to the first place where I'm performing, and I've got this. My opening sketch with these people is something called Late for the Prom. And so it's a sketch I do to music about some guy that's fallen asleep and he's got to hurry up and get dressed for the prom. But I had asked the guy that picked me up at the airport, I said, do you guys have proms over here? Do you know what that is? And he said, well, no, not really. What is a prom? So I explained it to him. He said, oh, you mean a ball? I said, yeah, it's kind of like a ball. He said, well, you could just call your sketch Late for the Ball. I said, no, because a prom is a very special event.
Yeah.
It's a very big deal.
It's like coming of age.
Exactly. So I explained to the audience before I started, I said, I'm going to do this sketch. It's called Late for the Prom, so that you'll know a prom is a dance. It's like a ball that you have in high school, but you just have it once a year, and you get a very special date, and the girl goes out and buys a very expensive dress that she'll only wear once in her lifetime, and the guy goes out and he rents a tuxedo, complete with bow tie and suspenders. Nervous laughter runs through the audience. Oh, gee, what have I said? So I did my whole performance. At the end of it, the first guy that walks up to me says, we don't call these suspenders over here. I said, well, what do you call them? He said, we call them braces. I said, okay, and so suspenders would be... He said, well, that would be what women use to hold together their naughty underwear. So I told him, right out of the bag that we go to this ball every year, and the guys go out and buy women's underwear, and that's what they wear to the ball. So it's and I could tell you story after story like that. I will just tell you one more, and because this has to do with one of my favorite jokes. It's not my favorite joke, but it's a really good joke. A short one. I like to tell it, and I hadn't really heard anybody else tell it. Well, question. I'll go ahead and ask you, Alec. What's the difference between boogers and broccoli?
I don't know.
Kids won't eat broccoli.
That is true.
Now, see, that's kind of a cute joke over here.
Yeah.
But a man who was a pastor at a church that I attended said that he got asked to do a revival week at this church in Scotland. And so he goes, and the very first night he's thinking, if I'm going to get these people on my side, I need to tell a joke. I need to tell something funny. So I'm kind of loosen them up, get them ready for the week. So he tells that joke. And when he tells it, the whole congregation, when he asks the question, it's, what's the difference between boogers and broccoli? From the whole congregation. He doesn't know what he said, but he knows he's got to finish the joke. Kids won't eat broccoli. The whole congregation. He finds out afterwards that in Scotland, a booger is a child molester. He didn't know. How could he know?
What else would you call a booger?
I guess you know anybody from Scotland?
A couple, yeah.
You need to ask them.
Yeah, I could.
I would, when you talk to him, first ask him, I've got a personal question. Please tell me you won't give up our friendship for this, but I really have to know. I understand this is something different, unusual, unique in Scotland. What is a booger? And see if they tell you. what I
I
told
wish I had I played soccer in college, and we had a lot of internationals on the team. And one of my best buddies that I played with, his name was Cam Steer, and he's from Scotland. I wish I still had his phone number because
you should know.
we could call him
You
live
could find
on the
his
air.
note
Yeah.
if your school was still a school.
Yeah, if my school still existed.
You could get.
I could get
it
his
through
number.
them.
Yeah, but unfortunately it doesn't. But next time I do come across speaking to him, because I know he still does hang around the Buffalo area, I will be like, "Hey, Cammy, I know it's been a while. I just got to know."
Now, get this. It's not just like, for instance, my grandmother on my father's side, her maiden name was Boozer. So I grew up going to Boozer family reunions. And my dad was born in South Carolina. That's where he grew up. That's where his relatives were. So I already knew that the state was loaded with Boozers in South Carolina because we'd go visit, his Uncle Evan or his Uncle Dick or, all these relatives he had there.
I'm sorry, I'm just thinking of Dick Boozer.
You shouldn't have gone there. So, anyway, as a kid, my first job was running a paper route. I was 13 years old.
I had one.
There you go. I carried the Atlanta Journal-Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
And Atlanta Constitution was the morning paper, Journal was the afternoon paper, but on Sundays they doubled up, and I did the Journal in the afternoon.
Huh.
Should bring that back up.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, you're
Yep.
sure we're recording again?
Right down there.
Okay,
Still
good.
good.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
probably different. I gotta move the mouse every once in a while.
Don't reach over into my part.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I'll try
So,
to do it.
so I'm on this paper route, and I get a new customer whose family's just moved in. Of course, I'm on the road every day delivering papers, so I saw them moving in, and they wanted a newspaper, and so I put them on my route. Their last name was Belcher. So I came home laughing after doing my paper out at dinner time and saying, "You'll never believe this. I've got a new family on my route today, and their last name is Belcher." And my dad said, "Well, son, actually, Belcher is a very common name in South Carolina." I said, "Well, between the Boozers and the Belchers, I'm going to stay out of that state."
Yeah.
So I don't know that I've been back to the state since, but
Right.
um,
Well, there is no boozing without belching, so they kind of go hand in hand.
I can't argue that point. Can't
They
argue
do
that
go
point.
hand in hand, boozing and belching. Belching usually follows boozing, but
Okay. Okay.
if I'm getting that order correctly from my college years, but
Well, I've got my own habits that produce belching.
Yeah.
Among other things, but we probably better not go that because this is our first time interviewing.
Yeah.
And you may want to have me back.
Steve, I've been having a great time so far. I would love to have you back.
Okay.
I just have one really important question with talking to my mom recently about having you come on the podcast. She has informed me that you do, as well as I do, believe that the world is very woke nowadays.
Well, I mean, it just is.
It is. It really is. Would you like to elaborate on, because my version of woke and your version of woke might be a little bit different, but I feel like the age gap, not to date you, Steve is very young, but I'm saying our age gap for what Steve has gone through in his life and seeing wokeness versus what I've gone through in my life and seeing wokeness could be two varying levels of wokeness that's going on.
Well, and I think they can be. When the term woke started several years ago, not 20 years ago, but let's say 10 years ago, it started in reference to the issue of racial divide in America.
Right.
So there was Black Lives Matter movement. There was a lot of, it was in the media and politics and that kind of thing, about trying to erase any kind of racial divide that may exist in our country.
Right.
Which I'm game for, 100%. To be honest with you, if you're here, you're either a visitor or you're an American. And as far as I'm concerned, you're one of the two.
Yeah.
Which country you're from, what race you are, or what your ethnic heritage is, what does it matter?
Yeah.
You're here now in America, either as an American or as a visitor because you wanted to come here.
Right.
So,
like, you wouldn't go to Italy and say, I'm an Italian American or an American Italian.
No.
If you live there, you would then become an Italian because you're an Italian citizen. Like, my thing is that I don't like hearing all the time is I'm very proud of being an American. I grew up here. I was born here. My dad served in the military. I'm very proud of being an American. You're an American if you're an American citizen.
Yeah.
You don't. The problem stems, in my opinion, is when people self-segregate.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a Latino American, or I'm a Italian American, a Polish American, German American. I'm a Spanish American, Hispanic American, whatever. You're American. You live in America. You have the same rights that I do because you're a citizen. We can all vote, speak freely, own guns. We can pretty much do whatever we want within the confines of the Matrix, but you're an American. And I feel like it just stems from, it starts with the government sprinkling these ideas in there, but then the people just pick up on it, and then it becomes your identity. It's kind of like a learned helplessness where you just get so bogged down by it that it just, you wear it. That's just
I
what
would
it
agree
becomes.
with that, but let's go through a couple of things before we get there.
Yeah.
Like we were saying, it started, I'm going to say, in the neighborhood of 10 years ago.
Right.
With having to do with racial concerns in America, black and white.
Yeah.
Okay? And it wasn't too long ago that a couple was visiting over at our house, and for some reason that day, I don't know if I heard something on a podcast or seen something at work or had experienced something at a grocery store or something, and I just came home and said to my wife something about, I can't believe all this. I wish we could get away from this woke stuff.
Yeah.
And the couple that was at our house said, well, we're woke. I said, are you? Because at this point, it's gone way past the racial thing.
Right. It's everything.
And so I asked, what do you mean by woke? And they said, well, we're for racial equality. I said, well, so am I. What does that have to do with woke and the way it's defined today? And they said, well, how do you define it today? Well, woke these days is all about the different, 50 different genders today, 60 genders tomorrow, 70 genders the next day, having to use someone's preferred pronouns, he, she, they, z, whatever. I don't know what they all are.
Right.
In fact, I don't think anybody knows what they all are because people are coming up with new ones all the time. And you're supposed to use their preferred pronoun when you've never spoken to them before? I'm supposed to just be able to intuit?
Yeah.
No, and then they start saying, no, you've got to ask me. When you meet me, you need to ask me what my pronouns are. I've never had anybody ask me my pronouns.
Yeah.
I would really like for them to. Because my pronouns are Your Excellence and His Excellence. So if you want to get my pronouns right, that's how you refer to me.
Right.
Your Excellence, His Excellence.
Well, then it becomes a competition as to how woke are you. Like, yeah, you say you're woke, but
Well, but there are so many other elements.
There's
to
so
wokeness,
many, yeah.
Like the idea that there is a sex that you're born with, but your gender is something different from your sex. No, it isn't. Fact of the matter is, I remember, and they've both been in the English language for a long time, but I remember back in the day when they started using the term gender,
Right.
and the reason they started using the word gender was because the word sex
Men.
had a I don't know how to say this, had a dirty connotation to it. And so to ask somebody, what sex are you?
Right.
That was like doing this.
Yeah.
So they started on forms, instead of putting sex, they put gender.
Yeah.
But they're the same thing. And the idea of somebody saying, well, I don't want to be a woman, I want to be a man.
Go for it.
I don't want to be a man, I want to be a woman. Well, there's a psychiatric term for that, and it's called gender dysphoria.
I had that for about 72 hours back in
Really?
high school. Yep.
Really?
I was filling out the form for the SAT, and it gave you an option to pick your gender. So me being the smart aleck,
You go, boy.
smart aleck that I am, that my parents named me, I decided to put that my gender was an Apache attack helicopter on the SAT form.
Excellent.
So I showed up to my SAT, and I showed them my form. Well, they have to also match it up to your physical ID. Well, because my physical ID, my driver's license, said that I was a male, and the form said that I was an Apache attack helicopter, I had to forego taking my SAT that day, had to go redo my form to make sure it matched my driver's license.
They didn't even get that gender is fluid.
Yeah, at that point they still didn't understand that gender was fluid, but they gave me the option to choose. And what is a 17-year-old high school boy gonna do on a form where he's given the option to choose, but put that he's an Apache attack helicopter? Please explain that to me.
I wouldn't have, but let's just say I may not have been as creative as you when
Right.
I was 17 years old. But and you've got people who are saying, lifelong for 30, 40, 50 years,
Right.
they've been a male, and they suddenly decide, no, I'm a female.
Caitlyn Jenner.
And so they'll take hormones. Now, my understanding is that Caitlyn Jenner did not have any surgery to remove, let's call it, the plumbing that they were born with. Because it's all about, and the people who are opposed to it say that you don't want to get your genitals chopped off.
Right.
Or there are other ways to say that, to put it in terms that talk about that express how ridiculous and how stark and how drastic and how permanent it is.
Right.
So these people who were always a man decided that they would be a woman, start taking the hormones, and sure, they might start developing larger breasts.
Right.
Could just be that they're getting older and they're getting man breasts. But
Happens.
However it comes about,
Right.
maybe because of the hormones, maybe something else. They might even have the surgery. But the news is that every single cell that reproduces in their body, I'm talking millions of cells per day, every single one of them has a Y chromosome.
Yep. And an X or an XX.
So they're not. At that point, I'm talking about someone who's a man who's wanting to become a woman. Every one of his chromosomes, every one of his cells has a Y chromosome, labeling him as a man. And for men who want to get the surgical changes, they're still working with that and having issues with trying to make a pretend organ that's not really an organ because it's not functional,
Right.
and have it be attached to the body so that the body feeds it blood
Right.
and encourages cell growth so that it doesn't rot and cause
Decay,
disease and decay. And
Well, my question is, why would you want to wait longer for the bathroom when you're out? There's always a line for the women's bathroom. There's never a line for the dude's bathroom. I mean, that's a huge luxury. I mean, I would think being able to just walk up, drop trowel, get out, rather than stand there, wait, be on your phone.
You know, I started a job. I started a job a few years ago that had there was a group of us that were being trained together for like I don't know, 8 or 10 weeks, something like that, at a facility before we'd go and work from home. And one of the new employees was a female who identified as a male. And you could, I'm going to identify her by her sex, because that's what was obvious.
Right.
Was her sex. And I don't recall ever being told that she wanted to be called a him or a he. But she would, at breaks, go to the men's bathroom. She never walked up to a stall. I mean, walked up to a urinal.
Yeah.
She would always go into a stall to close the door, because she wasn't a guy.
Yeah.
And there is not medical science available today. We talk about all this stuff with, you know, COVID and whatnot, where people are saying, follow the medical science, follow the medical science. Well, this is, you don't get much more medical science than you've got the plumbing of a female. You've got the chromosomes of a female. You are a female.
Yeah.
You may have gender dysphoria. There may even be surgeons who are willing to cut off or remove body parts for a price.
Follow the money.
So you can pretend that you're the opposite sex.
Right.
But you're not. You won't ever be. And it is not, what do they call it? Something having to do with health care. What's the term that they use? Gender affirming health care.
Yeah, gender affirming surgery or health care.
Gender affirming health care is, if you're a woman, you go and
become more woman.
no, what is it the women have? Like once a year, they get a
Pap smear. I don't know.
Pap smear.
That's probably
something
so wrong.
No, I'm sure it is. I don't know.
They have a gynecology appointment once
exactly.
a year, or a mammogram when they have
Exactly.
when they get to a certain age.
And men have prostate exams. A gender transferring woman cannot ever get their prostate examined.
No.
Because they will never, ever own one.
No.
So that is the essence of wokeness.
Yeah.
Having transgender men that are obviously men but dress as women. I was at a store the other day getting, I was in one of the main, what do you call it, big stores that has clothing and
Department store?
Yeah, department store. Thank you. Oh.
Like a Penny's or something
Something
like that.
I was in a big department store just last week, and some guy walks up to the women's perfume area. He's huge. He had to weigh at least 250 pounds. He was probably 6'1", 6'2", very masculine looking, but wearing tons of makeup and trying to take on feminine affectations in the way he moved, in the way he talked, in his word choice, but it stuck out like a sore thumb. I didn't want to do this. I didn't do anything. I just noticed it and went along with my business. But yeah, don't put any of those bubbles in my face.
Yeah,
I'm just saying. No, I'm kidding.
I don't know why it just did that. Sometimes it'll give you, if you give it a thumbs up, it'll give you a thumbs up. So I don't know if the
Really?
camera caught you.
Huh.
I don't
okay.
know why. It just did that.
But my thought was, dude, you're a guy,
Yeah.
and you're not fooling anybody. But I didn't say that.
Right. You can't.
And that is what woke is.
Yeah.
Cancel culture by policing people and not letting them in the public square,
Right.
in the public market, not letting them speak the truth at work
Yep.
or at school or where they live their lives. That is wokeness.
Yeah.
And so this couple that was at my house said, no, that's not what wokeness is. Wokeness is simply about racial equality. And they didn't understand
Yeah. It's
when I told them, no, it's not. It isn't. So the whole thing about wokeness, and the reason it's gone as far as it has, and this is when we were talking about this this past week about what we were going to talk about. I think you had said something to the effect of you wanted to get my thoughts on where America is today. And the fact of the matter is that I still think America is the greatest country on the planet.
Yes, it is.
The greatest country that has ever been, because of the freedom we have now. Are freedoms getting taken away from us?
Yeah.
Yes, they are.
And it's funny because our freedom's being taken away by allegedly adding more freedoms to other people,
No.
which I think is hysterical. Because it's like, how do we get more? Like, my biggest problem is like all these people that are like, oh, we don't have rights. We don't have rights. If you're an American citizen, you have rights. You have rights. I have rights.
Yep.
My fiance has rights. My brother has rights. My gay best friend from high school has rights. The transgender dude I saw at the gym last week, he has rights. We all have the same exact
And
rights.
nobody has fewer rights than anybody else.
There are multiple amendments in our Constitution creating rights for everybody. Women, blacks. I mean, gays and trans people have rights in our in the U.S. Constitution.
Above and beyond
Yeah.
people that are not gay
Yeah.
or trans.
And so it's just coming to a point where it's boiling to a point where it's like, why can't we all just sit down and be like, hey, you're your own person, I'm my own person, you're going to live your life however you want to live your life.
And as long as you're an adult,
Yeah.
you get to do that.
If you're an adult, you can do whatever you want.
But if it involves kids,
No.
no.
That's different.
That-
Let kids be kids.
And let their parents be the ones
Yeah.
to guide them in
Parents are going
right
to
or
parent how you
appropriate.
parent.
Yeah.
Like, your generation had different parents than how my parents raised me, and I'm going to raise my kids different how my dad raised me, and my kids are going to raise their kids different how my kids raised them.
And when you raise your kids different than your dad, I'm going to tell him.
No, I'm not going to raise them different than my dad because I think I turned out okay for the most part. I mean, there's a couple open court cases that are being settled right now that
We'll let those play out.
might say otherwise that
We'll
are going to
let
play
those
out
play
here
out,
soon. But aside from those, I feel like my dad did a pretty good job of raising me. But I don't know. I feel like across the board, look, everybody's entitled to their own opinion. Everybody's entitled to their own way of life. I don't go and trespass on your life. Don't come trespass on mine.
Let's go back a little bit from some of what we were talking about before, because we were talking about language and how there are differences, that there are regional differences, there are familial differences, there are cultural differences, there are I'll say ethnic differences.
Yeah.
And I think those differences in America are part of what makes America a great country.
Yeah.
Is because we allow those differences. I'm game for them to be made part of the American fabric.
Yeah.
By all means, bring what's important to you from your ethnicity. Live that, but don't push it on everybody else.
Right.
Don't expect everybody else to accept what the way you live as how they live, but don't deny them the freedom to take on the things that you have to offer.
Right.
I'll give you a good example of that. And this goes back to the language thing. And in the recordings that I'm doing, I don't have anything on the internet yet. I'm hoping to before too long. But one of the things that I want to address are rhetorical questions. So a rhetorical question is essentially a question that somebody asks that you're not supposed to answer.
Right.
Because either there is no answer for it, and it's just understood there's no answer for this, or everybody knows what the answer is, and so you don't have to say, you don't have to say what the answer is. But a lot of times rhetorical questions are asked because we don't know what the answer is.
Right.
It's like, here's a question, but what's the answer? A good example would be maybe, and I've seen this a lot because I've seen a lot of little kids playing baseball, t-ball. And when a kid's playing a game for the first time and he's right-handed and he hits the ball and it goes out into the field, the coach says, run, run, run. And where does the kid run? To third base.
Yep.
They don't run to first base. They run to third base. And I've seen adults so many times ask out loud, why is it that kids run to third base instead of first base? Well, I got a pretty good idea why. Because when they're learning to play t-ball, they're developing and they're just learning so many other things.
Right.
And the primary thing that many of them are learning is how to read and write. And in America,
Start from the left.
that's left to right.
Yeah, makes sense.
People, people ask the question like there is no answer, that it doesn't make sense and it will never make sense. And I'm saying, well, when it comes to a rhetorical question, have have a desire to find out what the truth is.
Right.
I want to know what the truth is about everything. I want to know if I'm wrong, when I'm wrong about something. I want to know what is right. I don't want to be right. I don't want the thing that I've decided to do to be considered what's right. If I'm not doing something right, I want to know what right is so I can strive for that. So
Right.
I can make that my goal. So I can make that my direction, my attitude. And the rhetorical question of for instance, I don't remember where I was going with this, but about the language thing. I've heard this asked, I don't know how many times in my life. It's that whenever you ask somebody, you're talking to somebody, you're at work, you're at school, you're seeing your buddies, whatever, and anytime you ask somebody, how you doing? What do they always say?
Good.
Or, another four-letter word,
Fine.
fine. And the rhetorical question is, why does everybody say fine?
Yeah.
Why don't they just say how they really are? I mean, if they've got a bum knee, say, well, I hurt my knee, or I'm not feeling so good because, my spouse got upset with me, or
Right.
or I'm feeling really great because tomorrow I get to go to a sporting event or a concert or whatever it is. Why do they always say fine? And they say that like it's a rhetorical question.
Right. It's almost like an answer that's a question. Like, fine. Fine? I'm doing fine.
Well, and to be honest with you, I think we've got too many rhetorical questions.
Yeah.
What we need to start providing is rhetorical answers. So when somebody asks a rhetorical question, essentially, there is no answer to this. I want to know, no, there is an answer, because you're saying, why is something this way?
Right.
Well, it's that way for a reason. I want to know what the reason is. And to be honest with you, what I think I've discovered about that question of why does everybody say fine when you ask them how they're doing, is because when you ask them how they're doing, you're begging them to give the answer fine. The response of fine is a cultural expectation of when you ask, how you doing? How you doing? You're expected to say fine.
Right.
If you don't, then they're upset with you. So what I started doing decades ago, I stopped asking, how you doing? Now I'm walking past somebody at work, I'll say, how about your bad self? And they'll say, fine. I mean, I don't know. And because I didn't ask the same question they were expecting me to ask. In fact, I asked them a question that essentially was the same question, but I asked it using different words that make fine no longer an appropriate response.
Just like, what are you up to? How you doing? Not much.
Same kind of thing. So I've made it a practice when I see people that I know and who know me, asking a different question.
Right.
There was a time when I lived in Florida. I worked for a small company. I don't know, 160, 180, maybe 200 employees. And we all knew the owner and CEO, president of the company. We didn't all know him personally, but he may have even known everybody's name at the company. And I'll never forget the first time I passed him in the hallway and said, "How about your bad self?" And he said, "Fine." I mean, and I just kept walking. He didn't know how to respond.
Yeah.
Because he was caught up in this is what you ask and this is how you respond.
Yeah. It's so
But the
routine.
next time I saw him, he had an answer calculated.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't ask him the same question. I asked him a different question, to which his answer wouldn't apply either. And what I'm doing when I do that, in part, I'm shaking people up and trying to get people out of the planned, the rehearsed, the expected, the usual. I want people to genuinely interact.
Right.
And there are people who would say that I have appropriated a term from another culture by asking, how about your bad self? Because that was a phrase used mostly by Black Americans back in the 80s, 90s. You know where I picked it up from? I picked it up from one of my, I'm going to say it's one of my top 5 favorite songs of all time. It's, might not be one of your top 5 favorites of all time. That's one of mine. From back in the early 70s by a group called the Hughes Corporation. Rock the Boat. I don't care where I am. I don't care what kind of mood I'm in. If I hear Rock the Boat, I just want to lose myself in it. I love that song. And at the end, it's so energetic, so joyous. The words aren't joyous through part of it because, you know, a guy's asking, why are you rocking the boat on this relationship that was working so well? But at the end of the song, the guy who's singing it, he's just kind of riffing on the music and throwing stuff out there, and he says, rock on with your bad self. Well, I picked up on that.
How about your bad self?
I was a kid.
Yeah.
But I incorporated that into my vocabulary as a kid.
Right.
And now, with one foot in the grave and one foot that's still out helping me live, I'm still using that phrase.
Right.
Am I doing it as a slight to anybody? No. Am I doing it as a way to 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 ridicule anybody, or an attempt to steal something from their culture that I shouldn't have? No. That's a rich culture. So much is brought to this country by every culture. I want to incorporate those things that I think are great and work well for me, and use them. So, again, taking where we started to where we were getting to, and that is that there are differences between people.
Right.
We don't all need to be the same flavor. We don't all need to have the same personality. We don't need to have all the same vocabulary, the same family experience. We don't need to have the same job. We don't need to have the same skills. We don't. We need different skills, different jobs that we're good at. Because as an individual, it's hard to live anywhere on the planet unless you're in relation with other people who can provide things that you don't have.
Yeah.
So by incorporating those differences and making them, again, part of the fabric of being an American, that's what makes us stronger. Whereas woke is about separating everybody, making everybody different, but even beyond that, and here's where I think the true what's the term I'm looking for? The true sinister nature of wokeness is that I believe it is a deliberate effort to take the weakest among us and give them the most power.
Yeah.
Because they don't know how to use it. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've talked about before that gender dysphoria is a thing. Has always been a thing.
Yeah.
I've worked much of my career in psychiatric facilities. At least they've told me I worked there. I didn't get a paycheck. I'd sleep and eat there, but seriously, I've worked at a number of psychiatric facilities, and gender dysphoria is unfortunate, and I wish people didn't have it, but they do. I do know this much: when someone has it, it's not something to celebrate.
No.
It's not something to encourage people to use as a tool of power. The woke subculture, whatever you want to call it, they're the ones that issued this whole idea of defund the police. The first time I heard that, I thought, are these people crazy? Are they wanting a society where there is no law and order? Where we can't not keep people down, not keep people controlled or keep them away from being free, but not be able to enforce rules that are set up to keep society operable,
right,
civilized, productive. Because when you take away the need that we have, well, you can't take away the need we have for a police force.
Right.
We're going to always have a need for a police force. We're going to always have need for boundaries and consequences that occur when we go beyond those boundaries and do things that infringe on other people's freedoms. And by saying that you're going to take away the group whose specific purpose and skill set it is to keep us sane, to keep us productive, to keep us peaceful among each other, with each other, then you're just going to have chaos.
Yeah.
And so I think that the powers that be that are promoting wokeness are promoting chaos because they want to be the ones that have the control. They don't want reasonable disciplinary bodies or enforceable laws that make society work.
Right.
They want to disrupt society so that they have control of everything, and that's what wokeness is about. I think that's where it's taking us. So, where's America now? I think we are. I see the wokeness starting to come back the other way.
A little bit.
I'm seeing some things happening that are opposing wokeness and bringing it back towards the place it needs to be.
In the middle.
Which is, no, not even the middle. It needs to be wokeness, as it's understood, needs to be, let me try to get this straight here, needs to be out of the picture.
Right.
As soon as it doesn't need to be in the middle, it needs to be out of the picture. So that when it starts to come in the picture, the rest of society says, no, that's not the way humanity is meant to operate. Let's keep it off to the side. We know there's always going to be some people that want wokeness.
Right.
But we need to recognize it as being
Democrats.
the destructive force that it is.
Sorry.
Well,
Steve.
Yeah.
I think that's good for episode 1. I'm not sure.
Stop looking at me.
I'm not sure. Not sure how you. I mean, we've been going for over an hour here.
Oh, gee. Okay. My wife's going to wonder why I'm not home yet.
But I feel like we've gotten a lot done, and it leaves a lot of good discussion topics for the next episode, which I'm hoping will be sometime soon.
Yeah.
We got each other's numbers. I hope to have you back.
Oh, I know you're going to have other people, too.
Yeah, I want to have other people, but, I mean, you're just such an interesting guy, and you're the most readily available that I have. And probably
you didn't have to pay me much to
No,
come.
I didn't have to pay him much. He's very interesting. He just goes, and I love it. So I want to thank you very much for joining me as my first guest. I hope you had a good time.
I did.
I hope the listeners enjoy our stories, your storytelling, your ideologies, which most of my viewers share. People that don't, hopefully you all joined us for the full hour and 15 minutes that's going to be here, but I appreciate your time tonight. You've been more than great. Now I do owe you dinner.
Okay.
But yes, I appreciate you, and yeah. So
I do want to say one more thing, and I feel terrible that I didn't say this.
And I'm sorry, Rhonda, for keeping it so long.
I wanted to say this up at the front because on any of the videos that I record that are from me and may end up on the internet and viewed by whomever.
Right.
I decided some time ago that I want my first 3 words to be always the same because I thought about it and thought, what message would I want to give to other people forefront if I could give them no other message? And I want that message to be the first thing I say when I get on camera. And it wasn't tonight, but I'll let it be something that I leave you with. And that is, God loves you.
Amen.
We'll talk next time.
All right. Appreciate you, Steve. Everybody, thanks for tuning in. Have a good night.
Later.